כהיה לפני משה ומרים זה לי אנו ואמרו אדוני לו לעולם בעת יא 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 Turns to the Hashkivenu, a prayer for peace for being watched over on page 160, where the words juxtaposed with the words on our prayer and song service companion. I didn't know it had a title. Hashkivenu Adonai Eloheinu leShalom V'hamidenu Malkeinu lechaim Hashkivenu Adonai Eloheinu leShalom V'hamidenu Malkeinu lechaim Ushmot zetenu uvoreinu lechaim ushalom me'ata ve'ad olam. Sometimes I lay under the moon and thank God I'm breathing. Then I pray, don't take me soon, 'cause I'm here for a reason. Sometimes in my tears I drown, but I never let it get me down. So when negativity surrounds, I know someday it'll all turn around. 'Cause all my life I've been waiting for, I've been praying for the people to say that we don't want to fight no more. There'll be no more war, and our children will play. Hashkivenu Adonai Eloheinu leShalom V'hamidenu Malkeinu lechaim lechaim keinu lechaim.
Baruch atah Adonai, haporei sukat shalom, aleinu ve'al kol amo Yisrael ve'al Yerushalayim.
V'shamru v'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat la'asot et ha-Shabbat l'dorotam brit olam. They shall guard the children of Israel Shabbat. They shall make it for all generations a sign of the covenant. And here we are, for all generations making a sign of the covenant. And one of the questions I asked at a Torah study last year, I don't know if anyone was there, remembers it, was not just how we have received tradition, but how we pass it on. I ask us how we are good ancestors of our Shabbatot, how we are links in the chain, not just as receivers, but paying it forward. For some of you, this is no problem. For the teens, they were like, wow, I've never heard this before. But Shabbat itself, this Mishkan we build over the section of Tanakh, of our Torah, we are building it, chain by chain. We build it not just as a sanctuary in time for this time, but for all times going forward. With that, I invite you to turn to page 164 as we rise and face Zion for our Amidah, our standing prayer. Adonai sefatai tiftach ufi yagid tehilatecha. Adonai sefatai tiftach ufi yagid tehilatecha. Shalom bimromav, hu ya'aseh shalom, aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael, ve'al kol yoshvei teva, v'imru. Amen.
We now take a moment in our service to offer prayers of healing for ourselves, for those who are ill, for those who are dealing with addiction, for those who are in the midst of grief. As I glance around the room, if you have a name that you want to bring into this space, I invite you to do so now. Scott Van Gundy, Dave Stahl, Batja Peters, Sandra Goldberger, Mira Engel, Radine Coven, Sandy Corman, Debbie Pink, Rick Subridger, Ruth Murad, Daphne Talmor, Meredith Cooper, Rita Norton, Bill Rupright, Judy Sutton, Bernice Paris, Alex Chapman, Arlene German, Roz Zins, Linda Elner, Matt Kaplowitz, Gabriel Jacobson. And final words to Elna Amen.
El narefana la אז נתחזק ונתרבה אל נערפה נעלה, אל נערפה נעלה, אל נערפה נעלה, אל נערפה נעלה. אז נתחזק
To all of them, to all of us, to all of you, refuah shlema, complete healing.
Shabbat Shalom. I don't know why I have this. I'm not going to bother. So this week is... Oh, am I blocking your view? Oh, you're good. Oh, well, there's, you know. Does anyone know the Parsha this week, actually? Why am I telling you? You don't count. Okay. Yeah. This week is Partzat Tetzaveh. And... you know, I spent a lot of time researching this Parsha and thinking about it. It's a harder one, and I was reminded of a conversation I had on a trip a few years ago. I went to Israel, and it was an unusual trip. If, you know, the Israel, has anyone been in an Israel tour? You're on a bus, you're going around, right? And this one was a little unusual because there were 3 conservative rabbis, all Orthodox rabbis, and then 2 progressive Jewish rabbis, me and someone else. Needless to say, it was an experience. And we're touring around Israel, and they're constantly quizzing me about things. And I, and if we're gonna, a slight tangent, I can't resist. Right? At one point, they say, you know, is you sort of maybe like your dat lash, like maybe you were once Orthodox, but now you're not. And I said, is that a compliment? And he said, you know, I'm really not sure. But on that trip, I met an Orthodox rabbi. His name is Hodi Nims. He's he's fascinating and incredibly spiritual man, and he's the 18th generation descendant of the Baal Shem Tov, if anyone knows what that means. I don't know if that such spirituality is hereditary, but boy, he had it. But we got in an argument. I didn't really know him very well, and I wanted to introduce myself, and it's a group full of rabbis, so what did I do? I said, I'll argue with him. That'll be good. And I went up to him, and I said, you know, what do you think about the writings of Yeshayahu Leibovich? Yeshayahu Leibovich was referenced in Torah study last week. He's an interesting and controversial figure. He's this Israeli polymath. And he's also a bit of a stickler. And he's very orthodox. He sees himself as like the direct descendant of Maimonides, ideologically. And he has some interesting ideas, right? He opposes the total, what he calls the shrinification of Judaism, where we, like the Kotel, the Western Wall, he famously called the Diskotel. And he's very, and one of the things he says, though, is that Jews do things because Jews were told to do things. That's it. If the Torah, if you love the poetry in the Torah, if the Torah is about the poetry, well, there's better poetry out there. If you love the narrative in the Torah and you're really interested in reading that, you could do that, but he said you could also read Hamlet. Perhaps it's the moral teachings of the Torah, he says, but you know, There's actually a bunch of Greeks who are really good, and the philosophers are really good at that. He said, no, what it has to offer is the commandments. He famously says, actually, when I'm thinking about it, he said, if God told you on Friday night to pray from the phone book, you should pray from the phone book. And he says, if you show up to Friday night services excited to how spiritual and happy it's going to feel, he says, you're an idolater. You should be showing up because God told you to show up. And if you're showing up for some other reason, what are you praying to? That's no good. Needless to say, Yeshaya Leibovich was probably not very fun at parties. So I go up, I'm on this trip, and I go up to this rabbi and I say, what do you make of this? And he said a few things. He said, Michael, it's like 11 o'clock, really? And we were about to have lunch. And then we got into it. And I said, but think about tzedakah, right? Why do you give tzedakah? He's like, well, we're going back and forth. And I made the case in front of him. I said, maybe I feel really good when I give tzedakah. But what happens if I'm not feeling so good? Do I still give tzedakah? Or perhaps, I give tzedakah because my community does it. What happens when I'm not in my community? Do I still give tzedakah? I said, I think the reason you give tzedakah and the reason it's so important that it is a commandment is it doesn't matter how you feel. It doesn't matter how you relate to it. You just do it. That's what a Jew does. They give tzedakah. They give tzedakah. Are you sure you're Reformed? But that was the conversation we had. He said, I think you're onto something. And I was remembering that conversation this week because I was reading Parshat Tetzaveh. Has anyone read this parsha? I didn't even know it, so I shouldn't. I don't know why I'm asking this question. Parshat Tetzaveh is a detailed description of the setup and garments of the high priest. Moses never appears once in this parsha. His name is stricken from the parsha. And the high priest, there's these, it's called the Urim and Thummim, these mysterious ritual objects. The priest has a garment with gold adornments. There's a choshen, thank you, and also the ephod. And there are 12 stones that are set. It's very, what's the word I'm looking for? Pedantic. Not to correct you, but if there was ever a word to correct you on. And I spent too much time reading. Like, how am I going to approach this parsha? So I called Rabbi Nico. I said, Nico, I'm not feeling that inspired this week. I'm struggling with it. And he said, well, that might be your problem. Because it's a very progressive Jewish thing to show up to the parsha hunting for meaning, waiting to be inspired. And if it doesn't have it, what a letdown. If it doesn't have it, what is our Judaism that week? What does the parsha mean to us that week? Is our relationship with it suddenly in question? This is a distinctly Jewish and liberal Jewish specifically, phenomenon. We really love the interesting things like this, but when the parsha is the shoresh of tetzaveh, it's sav, right? From mitzvah or tzivui, command. It's a bunch of commandments. The whole parsha is a bunch of commandments. I once had a rabbi who said in a really great sermon, he said, Michael, if you really want to look and find a happy person, you'll find them digging up dinosaur bones or planting a garden, reading a book, building a ship. They're out doing things. The reality is those who are, saying, I'm searching for happiness, I'm on the hunt. I think the odds of actually finding happy people among all of those people desperately searching is quite lower. And so too is this idea about this week's parsha. If we approach it in this way, we're in trouble. We're on the hunt, as opposed to saying, we're simply going to take it in, do it, meet it as it is. I don't necessarily, by the way, agree and want to endorse Yeshayahu Leibovich. He's one of the figures who I sort of stay up late and argue with in my head. But I do think there's some real meaning to this approach. We are commanded. To be a Jew is to be commanded. And conveniently, or fortunately, I think, we are Reformed Jews. We're in relationship with the commandments, but that relationship can be one of reverence, not necessarily obedience. When we look at our Parsha, we can still treat it with reverence, and the commandments in it, and the details, and even though we're like, oh, it's not so meaning-rich or narrative-rich. But it doesn't necessarily need to be obedience. Or as the great Reform Rabbi Solomon Freehoff said, our relationship is one of guidance, not governance. 2 weeks ago, I stood, well, I was going to say up here, but it's actually over there. I stood in front of you all, and I talked about this idea, na'aseh v'nishma. Right? This phrase, we shall do and we shall hear. I think something, too, that same relationship really applies to all our commandments. If we want to be progressive Jews, but Jews who have meaningful moments, spiritual moments, Jewish moments, we have to stop the search and we have to start the doing. So with that, Shabbat Shalom. We are on page 586 for the Aleinu. I invite you all to please rise, and I invite all of those who are under age 35, is it 13, to come up and open the ark for Aleinu. Go, go, go. Inu l'shabeach Adon hakol Latei kirula leotzer reshi Shelo asanu kigoye haratzot Elo samanu chot adama Shelo sam chelkenu kahem Vegor aleinu kechol hamonam V'anachnu korim umishtachavim umodim Lifnei melech malchei hamlachim HaKadosh Baruch Hu.
Page 590. Hatatu b'Toratecha.
Adonai yimloch olam va'ed v'nemar v'haya Adonai l'melech al kol haaretz b'yom hahu yeh Adonai echad Ushemo echad. Before we conclude our service, you may be seated, if you so please. Before you conclude our service, I want us all to take a moment to remember to acknowledge those in our community who are no longer with us. We're reading aloud the Yartzites.
Remember those who died at this season in years past. Annette Cass, David Kalkstein, Edith Goldenson, Francis Cohen, Hannah Brunner, Henry Fenster, Irene Samuels, Jerome Schoenfeld, Jerry Rosenberg, Johann Simantov, Leon Sobel, Leonard Greenfield, Maxine Ashry, Melvin Schenker, Ethel Schenker, Molly Schnettman, Morris Ashry, Nathaniel Ratner, Nina Grossman, Rebecca Sherman, Shelley Klein, Waldtrout Petri.
I want to invite you, if you are in the Shiva, the first 7 days of mourning, to please rise and share, if you're willing, the name aloud of those you're remembering. Thank you. If you are in the Shloshim, the first 30 days of mourning. If you are in the Shana, in the cycle of the first year of mourning, I invite you to rise and share.
Michael Foley, Annabelle Jacobson, Carol Pickard, Sylvia Hartman, Bob Weissman, Harold Rosenberg, Gloria Alabaster, Ulrich Dennis, Marie Siegel, Joe Stein, and Ronald Hartman. Vivian Lennon. Larry Goldman. David Lieberman and
Thank you. And now, as according to your tradition, most
You
of
have
us...
a yard site.
Oh, a yard site this week. I'm so sorry.
If you have a yard site this week, we invite you to rise and share.
Thank you.
my mother, Frances Cohen.
Thank you. And now, as is your tradition, you may rise or sit as we join our voices or our hearts with the mourners on page 598 for the Mourners Kaddish.
Before we do that, the congregation offers condolences to Diane Fisher on the passing of her uncle Sid Gersh and to Charlotte Kibble on the death of her friend Ellen Kashik.
Yitgadal v'yikadash shemei rabba ve'elma divrach chirutei ve'amlich malchutei v'chayechon v'yomechon v'chaye dechol beit Yisrael v'agala v'zman kariv v'imru Yehei shmei rabba mevarach le'olam olmei almaya Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitfa'ar v'yimam v'yitnaseh v'yitadar v'yitale v'yitalal shmei d'kudsha brichu le'ela min kol birchata v'shirata tush b'chata v'nechemata dami ran be'alma v'imru amen Yehei shlama rabba min shemaya v'chaim aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'imru Oseh shalom bimromav Hu ya'aseh shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael ve'al kol yoshvei tevel v'imru.
Amen. May the memories of your dear ones always be a blessing in your life and to all of your loved ones. Yehei zichram baruch.
With that, I want to invite up, you may be seated, I want to invite up our board member this evening for announcements.
Do we have a word up this evening?
I am happy to do the announcements.
You want to do it?
Sure. Tomorrow we have our Shabbos table. Everyone belongs to the Shabbos table. There is a youth Shabbat service at 10:30, a Tat Shabbat at 11:30, and there will be a lunch after the morning Shabbat service at around 12:15. Please sign up. Where? Oh my goodness. Tuesday at noon, there we have a lunchtime perspectives with Nadav Tamir. Nadav Tamir is the director of J Street Israel, and he will be speaking with Rabbi Nico. Register for lunch on... Yeah, there we go. And lastly, this week, Purim is coming. Our service, banquet, spiel are all be on Thursday, March 13th. Please RSVP. Details going out soon. Our children's spiel, Esther Goes Over the Rainbow, will be on Friday, and our Purim Carnival will be held March 16th. Coming up, of course, we have a collaboration with Congregation Sinai to feature Devorah Sachs-Mintz, the rabbi who joined us last year, the incredible musician. And that is again March 27th.
So some of the events with Deborah Sexton are taking place at Sinai.
Sorry, guys.
Thursday evening, she's doing a
That's all right.
workshop. You can sign up for that through Sinai's website. Friday evening, there will be no services here. We'll be all coming together and meeting from Congregation Sinai. There's a dinner following that service. Please register online for dinner there. And I believe there's a tish afterwards. And then Deborah Sachs-Mintz will be with them on Saturday morning. We will be here. We have a bat mitzvah, but we invite you to either come here or to join her there. And then Saturday evening here we'll have a concert. So it'll be a fabulous weekend. If you were here with us in February last year to hear her, she was amazing.
With that, I invite you all to join me and stand for the Kiddush, which can be found again on page 122. Vayer vayivoker yom hashishi, vayechulu hashamayim va'aretz, v'chol teva'am, vayichal Elohim b'yom hashvi'i mikelechto asher asa, vayishbot b'yom hashvi'i mikol melechto asher asa, vayivarech Elohim et yom hashvi'i v'kadesh oto, ki vo Shabbat mikol melechto asher bara Elohim la'asot. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, Borei pri hagafen. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kishanu b'mitzvotav, v'ratzavanu, v'shabbat kodsho, be'ahava ufratzon, hinchilanu, zikaron lema'aseh bereshit. Ki hu yom techila lemikrae kodesh, zecher letziat Mitzrayim. Ki vanu v'charta ve'otanu kidashta im kol hamim v'shabbat kodshecha Be'ava uvratzon hinchaltanu. Baruch atah Adonai mekadesh HaShabbat. L'chaim. Oh, thank you. I invite you now to join where we're still standing with your family, with your chosen family. I'm going to do-si don over to mine. And we say with our family the blessing, found on page 603, in case you ever wondered. We say together, May God inspire you to be like the loving ancestors and forefathers and foremothers of our tradition. We say as well, Yivarecha Adonai v'yishmerecha, may you be blessed and may you be kept. Ya'er Adonai panav elecha v'chuneka, may God's light shine upon you, and may God be gracious to you. Yisa Adonai panav elecha, may God's presence always turn towards you, and may you always find a reason to keep yourself anchored in commandment. Vayasem lecha shalom, and may all your paths be peace. Amen. Shazuli mikdash v'shachanti betocha anachnu Nevarech ya me'ata ve'ad olam yadidai dai 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 Yai dai 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 dai, yai dai dai yai yo, dai 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 dai, yai dai 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 dai, yai dai dai dai, yai dai dai, yai dai dai dai. Ya da 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 da, ya da da da, ya da da da. Shabbat shalom, everyone.